welcome to episode 12 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate on Twitter. My name is Xerxes, and I probably know more about shoe tying than you ever will. My panelists today are...
I'm Bob Hader.
I'm Carl.
And I'm Satinga, as always.
Now on this podcast, we have three rules. Zamu Svai. All rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Masjodik Zvai. You can nominate 3 games at a time via Twitter by hitting me up at GC9X, although probably pretty soon we're going to have to start cutting people down to like 2 games or even 1 game, because we got a lot in the queue. Hanamas Savu Vai. You can nominate games that have already been nominated, but what?
Did you say Zvai already? Don't you mean dry?
No, I don't.
Which one is that anyway? Is
this
that
is
German?
Hungarian.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
You don't know what it is.
I thought it was German.
Everyone thought it was German, but no. It's
I've done German.
You get some culture there, man.
You can nominate games that have already been nominated, but please don't nominate games that have already been ranked. If you want to know which games have been nominated and which games have been ranked, you can check for yourself at bit.ly/47kgames. Okay, so our first game for the show is FTL: Faster Than Light. So FTL was nominated by Solacirus at Solacirus. It was developed and published by Subset Games. Came out in September 2012 for PC, Mac.
I believe it was an early
Linux,
Kickstarter success, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it? It was one of the first.
Wow, you don't see those very often.
It came out
nowadays.
in 2012, and it was Kickstarted. Think about that, because it's 2016 now, people. That's a long thing, you know. But definitely an early point where people are like, wow, crowdfunding works so well. Look, FTL, it's good. You know, trust us with money.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Inafune was inspired by this magnificent success. Okay, I'll show.
So yeah, I mean, let's kind of describe the game here. It's basically like it's a roguelike, but it's a sort of like a ship crew,
You're like a spaceship crew captain simulator sort of deal, like
Star Trek-esque.
It is.
I would call it a Star Trek simulator if you weren't running like some real dinky ass little scout ships, because like the Enterprise had a crew of at least 200 or more. Usually your crew is only as much as you can fit in the ship, which I don't even know what the maximum
I think it's like at most like 4 or 6 or something, because is the large number.
More than that.
You can have more than? Is it more than 8?
Yeah.
It's been a while since I checked the crew numbers.
It's quite a few. I know that you've got enough. You can get enough to have like some extra dudes just around. I know that. Like usually when I'm playing the game, I'll have a couple extra guys who just stand around waiting for the ship to be boarded. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, yeah, I guess. So what do guys do on the ship? What do they do? It's like
let's back up even further than that and say that this is. You could almost say it's Gradius X esque. In that it is about a lone ship that is entrusted to save the galaxy. You are you're part of the Federation. You're part of the establishment, and it's getting overrun by rebels or something. And so you're sent on a kind of what are you, like, trying to deliver a message or something?
Yeah, you're like delivering a message that we're being invaded. So
you've got some
that's not helpful.
Special data, I think.
The game has some excuse for why there's just one ship going across the galaxy to get.
It's not particularly good, but I do think it's kind of a gag that like somehow the rebels are like incredibly well equipped, and your Galactic Federation sucks.
Yeah, I was about to say that Star Wars fans shouldn't be confused. The rebels are actually the bad guys in this one. They're more like the what do you call them? The Reavers from Firefly.
Do they ever really explain what's so bad about them? I don't think they do. I think you just you can go through. So anyway, it's also a roguelike.
So it's basically a roguelike where the whole dungeon setup is replaced by a series of planets.
Right.
And
we should probably. I'd like to talk about the structure about this game a bit, because it's interesting. It's something that's been very popular in a lot of other roguelikes and games with roguelike elements. And I'm not entirely sure if this is the game that started it or what, but it's less like you have a dungeon, and it's more streamlined down to like a series of encounters.
Yeah. I mean, you know what it reminds me of is, what's it, that game, a Firelit Room, that like kind of text adventure roguelike? Part of like one of the classic browser games. But it's not that old.
I don't really know what you're talking about.
Firelit Room, isn't that what it's called?
I've never heard of that one.
Nobody's played this game but me.
I might have played it, but
everybody should look up this game because it is incredible. But that's like a roguelike text adventure. It's really
do you mean a dark room? Because I'm not getting anything for a firelit room here.
Maybe I'm misremembering it.
Anyway, there's some room game and it's text, and you should play it online.
Yeah, you should play it. Look it up.
Oh, hi, Cal.
Go room text online. Just find that. Good luck.
Point is, though, I kind of do appreciate how it's all streamlined. You don't have to wander around looking for the next exit. You always know where to go. Something is always happening.
Yeah, well, it's definitely it's one of the games that I think fits not as necessarily in rogue light, but rogue light, like it has rogue elements, but it doesn't like demand that you learn a whole heap of complex systems or understand like a huge amount of controls. It's all mouse driven, I think, if I remember correctly.
My question is, was this the first game of that kind of style, or has it been done before?
No, I've played roguelites before this game, but this is definitely one of those games that came out to popularize the idea of roguelike elements in not exactly roguelike games.
I feel like there's been a few like Starship simulators that weren't necessarily roguelikes, but had the same kind of like crew micromanagement.
They did. I think there's Star Trek Bridge Captain or Bridge Commander. There's a couple of Star Trek games that are exactly like this conceptually, but they usually are like really overly complicated in the worst ways. Like you kind of micromanage crew, but at the same time you're flying through space and you've got complete control of stuff and you've got too many systems. This game takes all the systems, shrinks them all down, and then only gives you one at a time to manage, which is very good.
Right. And you can like, it's not turn-based, but you can stop the action and like issue commands and then start the action up again. It's not frantic so much as it is.
If this game were fully real-time, it'd be probably completely impenetrable because you just have to deal with so much at once.
Right. So like the idea is that your ship has a faster than light drive, which allows it to go to jump from star to star. And then if you get to like I don't know what are they at the end? Like, are they called like work points or something where you can go to another quadrant of the galaxy or something, like not quadrant, but sector.
Right. Because the game is basically played sector through sector and you're being chased. I mean, we didn't really mention that you're being physically chased in the game.
So there's like an oncoming field that shows up on the map, and each turn you take, each ship movement you make, it goes another one. So a big part of this game is trying to outfit your ship as best you can by visiting as many planets as you can without doubling back and going to places you've already been.
What happens if you get in the way? Do you just die? Because I've never seen that.
You can survive. It's
actually really cool. You just start ship to ship combats, and your goal is basically to jump away. I think you have to beat one ship at least. I can't quite remember. But yeah, basically an endless wave of enemies start attacking you, singular ship after ship, and you have to fight until you can get your jump engines back online to get out of there.
Right. It's usually like not good because you don't want to. If it overtakes you, then probably most of the places you can go, it'll still be they'll catch up with you before you.
Well, this whole game is not like most of the. You really want to avoid combat in this as much as possible. You want to not be in combat.
But there's a lot of random combat encounters and stuff.
Oh yeah, you don't get to choose. But
you don't get to choose, right?
But you don't want to get caught in the wave of endless ships because you'll take damage that you don't want to take.
So right, but you gotta do battles though to get scraps.
Yes,
and you got to use scraps to buy either upgrade your existing systems or buy new systems, and that's really important.
Resource management is. Go ahead.
Right, I felt like when I play the game, I want to get into.
You want to get into scraps that you can safely win. You don't want to end up against something that's going to kick your ass.
Right, but I mean, you quickly develop. There's a lot of different weapon systems, and they recently updated the game to add like even more stuff if you want to, and it's kind of an option whether you want the additional content in there or not. It includes like brain slugs and stuff like that.
Resource management in this game is super important because you can fix your ship. That means you're not going to have any money for upgrades, or you can get upgrades, but you're going to have less health.
I think that does actually it makes it similar to the game we looked at, Ironcast on GCX home video. I think has
that's
a similar.
Game that's very much inspired by FTL.
Very similar.
This game's like a Cowboy Bebop simulator. You're perpetually poor, but you keep needing money to fix up everything and just sustain a decent living.
It's a good comparison.
I was going to compare it to Firefly also, but
or Space Dandy.
I still have to get on that series. I intend to soon.
Everybody should see Space Dandy. It's great. It is a lot more in the spirit of this game because it has all kinds of crazy ass aliens and stuff. Anyway, you start out with like a crew of like 3 people or something.
Depending on your ship. There's lots of different ships. You start with 1 and you can unlock others. Your basic ship is a human ship with 3 humans.
Doesn't the game itself say that humans are boring and unremarkable?
Yeah.
Yes, that's how race trait.
But you can add new people to your ship of different species. There are the Rock Lords or whatever they're called. There's my favorite guys to get are the energy beings who just by being in a station will add an extra bar of power to that station.
Right, because you have power management, which you didn't mention, but it's very, very important. You have to manage. You never have enough power to run everything in general. So those guys are really great because they will always give you power.
This is one of those games that has so many things that it's not hard to learn, really. It's hard to get good at, but it's not hard to learn if you just play the game and allow yourself to fail.
No, it's very intuitive. Everything makes really good sense. I'm very happy about it
if you can play it on an iPad, I would recommend that because you can just touch the things to it feels like more like Star Trek-y because you're like touching like a touchscreen computer. But
I do want to ask, has anyone actually finished this game ever?
I did.
Yeah, Cal can boast all about that. I have not gotten very far in contrast.
I think in all my runs I've had since I got this game on Steam, I've made it up to the 3rd sector.
You've gotten even farther than I have. I'll fully admit this isn't my type of game for the most part. I mean, it is very well made, but usually ones that are more about decisions than actions I'm kind of poor at, and this game is really rough if your brain isn't to full acumen. I mean,
it is.
Avoid nebulas.
I can pretty much... Well, don't always avoid nebulas. There's good reasons to go there, because going to nebulas will slow down the pursuing rebel fleet.
That's very important.
I keep getting boarded by assholes and obliterated, though. I just have horrible luck.
It's a risk-reward, which is a lot of elements in this game. You gotta sort of look at it and go,
it's amazing how well... It's not... You don't want to say balanced, because you're not playing against other human players, but it is like... There are a lot of balance, Yeah, there's a lot of different factors at play, and they really do matter to the game. And they got it right pretty much the first time. It sounds like. I really am impressed by this game. This is one of those. What I love about it is that it's one of those games that just the more you know about it, the crazier crap you can do. My favorite thing is
there's a lot of systems. There's tons of ships, tons of weapons and abilities, and they added more stuff too. So there's just piles and piles of content. It fits together really nicely. We didn't really mention that when you go to a planet or a place, other stuff can happen. Sometimes it gives you choose your own adventure sort of style questions where it's
do you help these people out or not? And sometimes you do, and they give you something in return. When people give you new weapon systems or robots or something, it's great.
I think for the most part, I think there's some exceptions, but I think the outcomes are mostly random, unfortunately.
They are, mostly. But there are certain encounters like the giant spiders. It's never a good idea to go down and fight the giant spiders, ever.
That's true for every game ever.
There's a few choices that are definitely net negatives, and then there's some which I think are coin tosses. They mix it up.
One of the worst things that can happen to you is you send out a crew member and they never come back. That's a big problem. But anyway, what I'm saying is
you can have a crew member betray you too, which is awesome.
Yeah,
they can turn code for evil.
You can sell your crew into slavery, I believe.
If you've got slavers chasing you, they can be either give us a crew member or they fight you, and you're like, what?
The great thing about the slavers is that you kind of want to run into slavers, because if you whoop their ass hard enough, they'll say, we'll give you a slave if you let us go. And then you can let them go and you'll get a new crew member. But you also perpetuate slave trade and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, if you blow them up, you'll kill everyone on it anyway. So
right, you're going to kill everybody anyway. So it's kind of like,
I have a stupid question. Do we know if this is a galaxy far, far away thing? Are we to assume that Earth has existed here, or is it like just so far in the future that like everything that Lincoln's worked for has just gone to crap?
It's like a Isaac Asimov-esque scenario where Earth was in the picture a long time ago, but people kind of lost track of it, and the galaxy has expanded to the point where nobody remembers where human beings originated. But I don't know. That's just my guess, because Asimov is like the go-to. Like, if you're going to guess as to what somebody's sci-fi inspiration was, he's usually the right answer.
Oh, hey, here's a little bit of game lore. Life ended on November 8th, 2016. How about that?
Wow. Fast approaching. What do you mean? Life on Earth?
That's the election day. I'm sorry. You already brought up.
You're not serious.
Speaking of,
I hope I'm not. Holy shoot!
Come on, let's move it.
Back on focus. Can
I say something real quick?
Please do.
I feel this game relies a little bit too much on luck, because it's very possible to end up with a bad situation that you can't really get yourself out of.
I think that's kind of a trait of true roguelikes. It's like
I can understand if you don't like that, but definitely as far as roguelikes go, if the ability for the game to just be like, you know what, screw you, you're dead. If that doesn't exist, it's not a proper roguelike.
You can be fighting a ship and it's going pretty well. Then they hit you, and then someone gets set on fire. So you can send out your guys to go deal with the fire, leaving your other systems unpowered, and then more fires coming up, and your guys are dying because of the fire, and then everything's on fire, and...
So vent the atmosphere!
Right. Okay, so here's before we rank it, this is a great point. This is my favorite thing about the game to do, is the game is one of those great games that has a bunch of different systems you can deal with that you can upgrade, and there's one seemingly useless system that actually becomes very, very important, and that's doors. If you have strong doors, especially in a case of invasion, it will take your enemies who board your ship a really long time to break down those doors. So one thing you can do is when an enemy boards your ship, you just evacuate that room and open up all the doors in that room except for the ones that, connect to, open up half the doors in that room and then just void the air in the room. You can open up the airlocks just wide open and just suck out the oxygen out. So they're like trying to break down the door. They can't teleport back to their ship, by the way, I don't think. So they can just try to break down the doors in time before they run out of oxygen, and you can just kind of watch them. You can also get a weapon that just sets fire to ships, and you can target your own ship with it if you want to. So if enemies teleport into a room that doesn't have any systems in it that can be damaged, you can just set that room on fire. And then once they die, you can open up the airlocks and suck the oxygen out, put out the fire really quickly, and then set everything up. And once the enemy's dead, you have all the time you want to fix up your ship again. Usually when somebody boards your ship, they're like a warlike species that is just determined to kill you. And
that's generally how it goes. I think it's more for you.
I've tried using the crew teleporter to put my guys on the ship, but they just get their asses kicked.
You got to teleport rockmen. Always send the rock lords. They know what to do. Enemies show up. They turn into a rock. They're like, what?
Right.
It's just a rock.
Rock lords
rockman, unfortunately.
they don't need oxygen, right? Is that what they...
Yeah, they don't need oxygen. They're healthy. I believe they're stronger than normal people, but they're crappy at operating systems, if I remember.
Right. I mean, the cool
you want
thing
them
is
exclusively combat.
There's kind of a Masters of Orion aspect to this game too, because when you find crew members and stuff that you can hire at different star systems at random, or you find on slave ships or something, they'll you'll see someone's already maxed out on navigation or something like that, and you get them, and you can skip ahead a little bit, or have a much more powerful guy or much better person at running a certain system. That's
right, because it's a slight leveling up system as well. There's so many little micro systems, and they all fit together so elegantly.
It's amazing that it was probably just made by a few people, and their vision is so complete on this. So, where do we want to put this? I think really highly of this game, but
firstly, I don't want us to be, like biased to super old games and be like, well, this game isn't old, so we're gonna put it at the bottom. Like, we have to to be really fair to this game and say this is a really fantastic title.
Because that's kind of what I do. How about between Super Castlevania 4 and Worms Armageddon?
I think it's definitely a Worms Armageddon-esque game in terms of like the enduring value of, like, people could be playing this game forever. There's no real, it could have been made 20 years ago without any problem.
I'm tempted to say below Worms Armageddon, but no further.
I guess it depends what you were after. I mean, Worms Armageddon is one of the better Worms titles. But to be perfectly honest, unless I was with a group of people, I would prefer to play FTL. Like, by myself, I would pick FTL probably.
If you can play FTL on it's like, I would put, this is like one of my, because one of our criteria is the 7 to 9 hour plane flight where you're just stuck somewhere and you can't move, and you can just, if there's a game that can absorb you so completely that you won't
It'd be really
get out of your chair.
To play this on a plane too, because you get the feeling of the.
I do it almost every time I fly to Europe or Asia. Like, I love playing this game on planes because it's like, that's what you're doing. You're just sitting down and you can't move. And when you've got a good run going, that's all you can think about. And hours can just go by and you don't even notice because you're so obsessed with, getting through to the next, warping to the next sector and all that. And
it's one of those games that people would have thought was a really cool idea, but never executed it very well.
Yeah, until there was the idea of kind of the indie, the 2000s kind of indie game revolution or something, where people are like, we can make anything into a roguelike.
That's kind of where we are now, though.
Right, that is where we are now.
I mean, in many ways, this is one of your favorite sort of original sort of titles. Like, this is definitely a game that feels. I can't pick a game before it that really feels like FTL. Like, FTL delivers on so many levels with just enough twists and unique elements to it that kind of just all show up at the same time. It's like, wow, yeah, this could have been made. You could have put a system like this on the on PS1. You could have done this no problem to some extent, but they didn't.
Oh yeah, or Amiga or Commodore 60. You don't
there's a bunch of Amiga games that kind of feel like this. I think there's games where you have systems to work, or you manage people and stuff.
Yeah,
there's
I'm fairly
Outposts and all these horrible garbage games that just really they don't get the systems right. It never balances. They're completely obscure. This one is so perfectly approachable.
I'm okay putting it above Super Castlevania 4 and below Aliens.
I'd still place Super Castlevania 4 higher, to be honest. Then again, I'm a little biased. I admit that for as very well crafted as FTL is, it's not my type of game. I admit, it does have a lot of options to it, but I'm bad at it. I call it for the lose. Jokingly, I have to admit, so...
I'm a little skittish to put it under Worms, but if you guys feel that's right, I guess...
No, I put it above Worms. The original placement, Super Castlevania 4 and Worms Armageddon. I agree on that one.
Just wondering whether it should be above Castlevania, and it's an interesting question. I mean, you guys know I don't have any love lost for Castlevania. It's not one of my favorite.
Yeah,
franchises.
I mean, Super Castlevania 4 is a well-polished gem of a game, of a platformer, but I mean, it doesn't bring that much new to the table. Then again, it's we did put it above Worms Armageddon.
With Worms Armageddon, I should mention that I like some other tank variants more than Worms. I think it's got too much crap going on, which is not what I think of FTL. I think FTL is
Worms is more approachable. At least I feel that way.
And I think Castlevania 4 is more approachable than both of them. But it's a different type of game, so I'm just comparing Kiwis and kumquats.
Well, okay, so far we've got 2 votes, right, for between Castlevania 4 and Worms Armageddon.
That's what I'll agree to, yes.
Okay, so it's between me and Cal now.
Yeah, you've got me... I'm really just trying to weigh up whether I'd put it above Super Castlevania 4, and my gut instinct is I would put it above Super Castlevania 4.
Well, then I guess we'll go with it so we can.
Well,
wait, what?
No, you don't just have to oh, okay, well, fine.
So I mean, we've got a coin flip situation here.
If you want, I mean, if Bob's reevaluating himself, but
well,
right.
I'd still rather put it under Worms again.
All right, somebody call it, okay?
Well, I'll give it to Tenga. Do you want to do it?
Well, since I technically have the least stake in this, sure. Feel free to toss it. Let me know when I should hit it.
Okay, go ahead.
Heads.
It is heads. All right.
That's
it.
Whoosh. All right. Well, there you have it. Science works.
Science. It is the luck of the draw, which is very
exactly.
much in FTLs.
If FTL dies as it lives on random chance.
And the game just got mugged in the Nebula, so it loses out to Castlevania 4, but it is nonetheless still really well made. One of the most defining indie titles of this decade, I feel.
It is a must-play indie game of the last 10 years. Okay, so our next game is Full Throttle, which was nominated by @ScottHDC, developed and published by LucasArts on April 30th, 1995 for, I think, just about anything that had a CD-ROM at the time. Well, no, actually, probably just PC Mac, right?
Right.
Full Throttle was, I believe, designed and mostly written by Tim Schafer. Features the voiceover work of one Mark Hamill playing Mr. Ripburger or whatever his name is.
Full Throttle was like the first fully Schafer game. I mean, he worked himself up in LucasArts on the first two Monkey Islands and Day of the Tentacle, but Full Throttle was his baby on his time with LucasArts.
It's kind of hard to tell too, because Full Throttle is a lot more grounded in style, I'd say. Like, you look at Psychonauts, which is very Tim Burton-esque, and Full Throttle is very much not in that kind of style.
Yeah, if you compare this to what quite a few might consider Schafer's magnum opus, Psychonauts, it's like looking at fraternal twins where one's 7 feet and the other's a ball. I don't know, it's just
like
an interesting
the
contrast.
movie Twins with Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's the analogy I was trying to think of. I just had a total
starring
brain fart.
Danny DeVito as a flesh-like ball.
Exactly. That's actually pretty accurate. No offense, Mr.
I think
DeVito.
the short
Excellent
explanation
actor.
on that is simply that this is, they gave Schafer control, but I doubt that he was, had nearly as much, he couldn't say like, well, it's a crazy universe where everything's wacky all the time. It's like, no, we remake like a game that's very similar to a lot of the other LucasArts games. They all did feel somewhat grounded, even when they went crazy or fourth wall breaking. There was usually a lot of grounding to sort of hold it together.
It reminds me most of, the art style's a little bit different, but it reminds me of kind of like a Batman the Animated Series-esque logic where there's some wacky out there things, but it's not like an unserious world.
Interesting compared to Batman, as you've noted that Mark Hamill is Ripburger, who is the villain.
Basically sounds just like the Joker.
Yeah, he pretty much...
Kind of just a little less loud.
So let's do the plot of this game really fast. So you play what's the main character's name?
Ben, the leader of the Polecats.
Leader of the
He has a
Polecats.
last name, but I don't know what it is.
Some say that it's just Ben Throttle, but this hasn't exactly been confirmed. I think they had to lose it due to some behind the scenes messery. I'm not sure exactly.
Ben is the leader of a biker gang named the Polecats. He inherited leadership from, I believe, Father Torque.
Yep.
Which is my favorite character in the game.
He's rad.
It takes place in, I don't want to say it's like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. It's more like just a kind of like
some point in the future, but probably not.
Kind of like kind of like just some Badlands area.
I'm reading 2040. Yeah, it's like society hasn't completely gone to pot, but the Mad Max influence is very apparent in the game's artistic
the only
direction.
Really futuristic thing is the flying cars, and they don't even fly that far.
Yeah, so like
I mean, part of the universe is just kind of like magical biker land in some ways, isn't it? Like.
It is kind of like
some sort of
like
weird
the biker
gang
economy. Valhalla, yeah. It's
like
if you're a good biker gang member, like when you die, you go to this game. I don't know, but there's
and if you're a bad biker, you go to Roads of Redemption.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cross between Mad Max and The Warriors, I guess is what I would describe it as. Like it's not really...
What is I have forgotten his sacrifice game. Brutal Legend, Brutal. It's a bit like Brutal Legends, scaled way far back to being almost reality, but it has that same sort of like feel to it, where it's just like not really actually Earth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a point and click adventure game. If we haven't said that, one of the great LucasArts point and click adventure games, in my opinion.
I think a few people would probably say it's their best.
Some people would. I mean, I don't think it's. I wouldn't put it up there with, honestly, like. The Maniac Mansion guy, what's his name?
Yeah, Day of the Tentacle, Bernard.
No, the guy.
Oh, Ron Gilbert.
Ron Gilbert. I wouldn't put it up there with Ron Gilbert's work. I feel like that is seminal in a way that Full Throttle is definitely building on that. It's like kind of like a Monkey Island style.
I think the strongest point of Full Throttle is that it looks really great. Like it has.
Yeah, that's. What I want to say is I always really appreciate how cinematic it is, for lack of a better word. It really does feel like a movie at points, and that's a very much good thing for an adventure game.
Yeah, the Scum engine had been LucasArts' Scum engine that they used for their adventure games had been repeatedly revised for almost every new game that came out. I forget which incarnation this one was, like 6th or so, I want to say, and yeah, just compare it to the last game before this, Sam & Max Hit the Road, which also looks great, but it's also certainly a lot more cartoonish, and the style's looser. Here, the style is very hard and somewhat realistic. I mean, I want to say exactly like the film Heavy Metal. I want to say there's maybe a vague ring of that in how the game looks.
I'd say it's a lot closer to The Warriors and Streets of Fire, which are by the same guy.
Yeah, Walter Hill. No, I could definitely see that.
There's no Rick Moranis, but...
oh, if only. I also want to say I feel that Full Throttle...
Maurice LaMarche or whatever. He's in it.
Yeah, he's one of Ripburger's 2 cronies, Nestor, I believe. Oh, yeah, I should mention that.
It's mystery, though. Like, you gotta... Like, that's one of the key things that differentiates it, I think, from other point-and-click adventure games, is it seems like there should be a lot more mystery games, but there aren't.
Right, because the framing device is a conspiracy.
Right,
basically.
yeah. Like,
it's almost kind of noir-esque in its story.
It's about
exactly.
What's the name of the company that makes all their motorcycles?
Corley Motors.
Yep.
Corley, yeah. So it's like the Harley-Davidson stand-in, right? It's like no biker, self-respecting biker would ever ride a bike that wasn't made by Corley Motors. And then the villain wants to like do some kind of he's got some kind of like murder plot to take over the company and make minivans.
I love that so much. That's
which
just
is great. It's a very 90s concern. But,
I mean, it probably would sound horrifying to any like dyed-in-the-wool biker for a company just totally abandoned its roots, but on an outsider's perspective, it's just such a hilarious concept.
I think when we're pushing around, I think a lot of the humor in this is not a lot of the humor is not like a ton of gags, but it's like there's a lot of like that sort of humor. It's just like like it's just really funny in places, like the concepts are funny and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't. Like visual ideas, I think.
Yeah, it's comically serious compared to the 2 prior LucasArts adventures, Day of the Tentacle and Sam & Max. This one is certainly more down to earth, a little bit more stoic, but it looks more serious than the offset, but it still has a lot of humor. It still knows what it is.
It's dry, but it's never like overly grim or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
He says, the main character says funny stuff.
He's got he's got to have the classic.
Oh yeah, I should know. Probably the defining role of voice actor Roy Conrad, who sadly passed away not too long after this game was released, like 5 years ahead or so. I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I know that they had plans to make another Full Throttle game. Unfortunately, Roy passed away before it was realized, and the project just never got off the ground, I think due in part to his absence.
They could have hired the Duke Nukem guy to do it. He would have not sounded all that
yeah, I almost want to say if Steve Bloom was around then, I mean,
like they could have just made it about a different character. It doesn't have to be about Ben. But anyway, like, I mean, there are the little details in this game. It has the only like hand table knife game mini game, probably the best like superfluous mini game in point and click adventure history.
Yeah, the only other games that I know that has that are Aliens Infestation and Red Dead Redemption. But the more games need to have the knife trick or the five-finger fillet or what you call it.
It's also got some other cool, just like the user interface design is really cool where you bring up like your command/item wheel and it's like this like burning skull.
It's their
biker tattoo.
Yeah.
But it's like you can actually hear, I believe, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I believe you can hear like the flames crackling off the tattoo for some reason. Every time you bring it up, it's like,
I recall that.
Yeah, I want to say that cursor interface is also considerably scaled down compared to prior Scum games, which I forget if it's like the simplest work within LucasArts, but I know that they come a ways from Secret of Monkey Island, which had like 12 different commands, pick up, put down, pull, push, and all that. All that's just been whittled down to your inventory and a few small bits.
I like how there's an option just to kick things.
Yeah,
Ben.
Always an option.
Yep, Ben is more physical than prior adventure game heroes, which I appreciate because there are some points in the previous adventure games where I think, why doesn't this character just punch someone? What, they're pacifists? Screw that! I want to get ahead and not have to like conduct some sort of elaborate Rube Goldberg-esque device to get someone out of the way. Let's just punch him and be done with it. And Ben does that.
If you're gonna speak about punching people, why don't you talk about the game's black sheep moment?
Ooh,
oh boy.
Well, unfortunately, we have been gushing about Full Throttle at this point, but it tried something that unfortunately didn't really take because it has combat sequences.
It's like Road Rash if Road Rash was orchestrated by a complete idiot.
Well, all right. I mean, it's not. You don't have to do that much. It can be frustrating.
I admit, kind of the brick wall for me in this game is a point where you have to like just drive around the world map randomly, just beating on people until something happens.
Yeah, a little less than halfway into the game, you have to go on, what was it called, Old Mine Road or whatever. The thing of it is, this actually is still an adventure game, even if it doesn't look like it. However, it's the game's entire perspective changes just to Ben riding his motorcycle and coming across various gang members on the road stretch, and he has to defeat at least one of each member for whatever purpose, and combat as it stands is just very janky. You just have to
Punch-Out-esque.
Move your mouse left and right and then just tap when they're close, but usually their AI is better than yours.
This has cast kind of an oddly long shadow, and not really. I mean, not a long shadow because nothing really. Adventure games kind of died shortly after this, but like you see this in certain Telltale games as well. Like I would say, like in The Wolf Among Us, you see this kind of thing. Like it's done better. It's more Punch-Out-esque. It's like a timing based fights.
It's basically just a QTE, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but it's an elaborate.
Well, that's something that adventure games have kind of always tried to do. Like from this point on, they're always like, okay, people don't just like puzzles. We have to put in mini fighting segments.
It's just something else to do. It's something. The point of an adventure, in a way, an adventure game is kind of like a beat 'em up arcade game, in that kind of the point of the game is to keep the player going to see what happens next. Not all adventure games can't necessarily rely on a story because you can get really convoluted. It's hard to make a game gamey enough in this genre and still tell a compelling story.
That's what I am pretty sure about this game. Like I said, the story is actually holds up really well.
Yeah.
Even the puzzles work that way. You always know what you have to do and why you're doing it.
Yeah, for
It never really feels arbitrary, like, say, King's Quest V.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. No murder boats to be had here. Yeah, for the most part, I thought that the game's puzzles were very grounded, and I usually didn't have too much trouble of what to do next, except for Old Mine Road, because the secret for those fights is that really you just need the right item to try and beat the gang members, so it usually isn't just a straight fight, but because the game's perspective just changes so wildly at this point.
Yeah, you feel like it's suddenly turned into Road Rash, but it really didn't.
Yeah, you feel like that you have to actually be fighting, but it's a giant curveball, and I think this is like the only point in the game where I had to inevitably look up an FAQ like I do for every adventure game ever, but this is the point where I had to do it, because I didn't know you had to get that green dust and throw it into Chainsaw Lady's eyes. How was I supposed to know that? I didn't even know you could go back that far.
You know, actually, now that you mention some of the characters you meet, like the weirdo future biker gang people, like it does kind of seem like it later would inspire something like Borderlands, which had it took it to a whole nother level, but it's kind of the same idea. It's like a future that resembles something kind of like a biker gang apocalypse type thing. I don't know. Anyway, why don't we rank this bastard?
Like one of those kid-friendly apocalypses, There's not skeletons and dead bodies everywhere.
Yeah, people aren't eating each other.
Yeah, everyone's still everyone's fine with it. They're not having a bad time. It's like,
doesn't get as dark as
people still like suits
Wasteland.
and such, so I guess.
Yeah, I should note that this is the sort of game where you use a bunch of robot toy bunnies to sniff out mines in a minefield for you. So.
Oh yeah, that part bugged me so much.
Really?
But,
I thought it was hilarious.
it was funny, but it got really annoying. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Let's rank this one.
Well, I did want to say two more things before we get to that. I honestly think, that going back to the graphics, that this game looks better than the next LucasArts adventure game, The Dig, where the characters didn't seem quite as detailed, and the setup of that game's visual design was less consistent. Although we're not talking about The Dig, so
The Dig is a beautiful looking game, but The Dig looked at Full Throttle and went, you know what? Full Throttle is too easy. Let's make this game impossible.
Yeah, that was the LucasArts game where I probably had to look up the most FAQs to try and get around to it. Well, we're not ranking The Dig. I certainly have worse to say about it if we get to it. But, no, scaling back things to Full Throttle, I also did want to once again compliment the voice work because... I should also note that a veteran voice actress, Cass Susie, who somehow I know best as Phil and Lil from Rugrats, she's Marine. She's there's a good deal to say about her character that's spoilerish, but she's this cool girl that Ben wakes up in the house of after his bike explodes, and she's really neat. And I think Tress McNeil's also in this as well. It's quite a few voice actors back from WB.
You know who else is in Full Throttle? Steve Blum.
He isn't. Oh, I'll be darned. I think he's not a major character, but I think he's one of the punks from one of the gangs. Back even before Cowboy Bebop. I don't know exactly when he got his career started. This really had a lot of awesome artistic talent, and it's got a lot of great style to it. If it wasn't for the Old Mine Road bit, I would say that this is definitely one of LucasArts' greatest adventures. But even in spite of that, it is still up there. I want to call it my fifth favorite of all the LucasArts adventure games that there is. A little shorter than the others, but it's actually longer than I thought it was. Just comparing run times to some of the other LucasArts adventure titles, it's only 20 minutes shorter in comparison, but... no, this one is definitely well worth playing. I have to check if it's on GOG or not, but I know Xerxes wanted to rank this, and
it's got a remaster thing, Double Fine was able to, I believe, right?
Well, I know they did that for Grim Fandango, but
I think it's back out.
They announced at the end of 2015 that Full Throttle's getting remastered, but it hasn't come out yet. I guess it's in the works at least. So anyone who wants to play Full Throttle, definitely look out for that. It should hopefully be on the horizon near the end of this year, so we'll see.
Okay, let's rank this sucker.
Let's go.
This is going to be tough because this game is leagues beyond King's Quest V and I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream.
I'm a real snob for LucasArts titles. I'm not the biggest adventure game fan, but the ones that LucasArts did for the most part, I think are the creme de la creme, and have yet to be topped even by a lot of modern adventure games.
I don't even know where I'm going to rank this one, so just throw something at me.
I would put it below Blue Stinger.
Oh!
Okay.
Well, that's just
because my range was I was like below Ikaruga. That's where I had been putting it in my head.
Okay, Xerxes, let me ask you this. I will agree to you to put it between Blue Stinger and Contra the Hardcore if you are placing Full Throttle on there without drawing the Dog's Bower card.
Well, here's the thing, is that Full Throttle is the kind of game that would really benefit from Dog's Bower.
Son of a bitch.
It would have. You can't argue that a character like Dogs would have made it
look, I'm a fair man, or a Dog's Bower-esque character. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no Dog's Bower. Like, the closest you get is Father Torque.
Okay, I'll admit, Father Torque should have been in the game more. He only appears for like 2 or 3 scenes.
You have to meet him on the road. It's like he's constantly moving on his bike, as I recall. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I don't think he ever stops riding his bike. Like, he just keeps going forever.
Yeah, like it seems like this game is missing like the constant presence of a grizzled older biker, older than Ben.
But it is funny. Like, the game is perfectly funny. Like, it's just, I feel like it's a little bit too, like, we didn't even mention the soundtrack, which is kind of interesting.
That's that one song that opens on Legacy by the Gone Jackals. That is how you open a game.
I do
that
think
is
that
really
song,
cool.
This is a legacy of too few for too much that I see. Yeah, it's excellent. Trying to think if there's anything that's above Blue Stinger I could place this next to. I'm going to admit I'm having a hard time thinking of that. Now, if we were to discuss... the only other LucasArts adventure games I like more than Full Throttle are Day of the Tentacle, Sam Max Hit the Road, Curse of Monkey Island, and Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. Now, if we were discussing that, I'd probably fight more to get it a higher place.
I mean, that's a lot of games to try and push higher like that.
Exactly. The problem is that it inevitably gets compared to the rest of its peers, which is not a fair comparison point.
Yeah, no,
for LucasArts point and click.
I mean,
I'm not really familiar with many adventure games. I just know that this one is very good, and that's good enough for me.
The thing about Full Throttle is that it has some issues, and it's very short, which is like surprisingly short.
Yeah, I said it is short
than a game in some way.
Yeah, it is shorter than LucasArts, most of their other adventures, as I've noted. Not too much shorter as I've compared, but it does still feel like there could have been at least one more area to this game, I think.
That's kind of why I'm putting it below Blue Stinger, because I think on the gameplay level, it's kind of... Like, Blue Stinger is a game that is... the gameplay is nothing special. What makes the game special is everything else about the game. Just the fact that it exists, is just crazy. And I think that's the same thing for Full Throttle.
I think that Full Throttle's world is really fantastic. It's just the problem is, this is definitely one where I want more of it. I would like to know more about.
I feel like once you get to the last part of it, I'm kind of like, I'm sort of ready for this to resolve itself. Is how I.
There's only so much depth a world of this type can sort of sustain. I would compare it unfavorably to Grim Fandango in that regard, where Grim Fandango is such a huge and encompassing world, and it works really well.
Right. Grim Fandango is the kind of game where you could make a new Grim Fandango and be like, there's so much more to explore in this world. Whereas with Full Throttle, it's like, I don't know whether I want to see any more Full Throttle. I feel like it's good as it is.
Too much desert, I guess.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. It's like, if you open the world up anymore, it's not going to be as fun.
You got a point. I would have been interested in seeing how that sequel would have turned out, but I get also the feeling that the canned sequel might have had more combat elements in it.
I feel like Brutal Legend in a way was kind of like the...
Yeah.
It does feel like there's definitely some Full Throttle in there. Even if it's just Tim Schafer still had more to say about bikes and metal and those sort of
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like that was to rock and roll what Full Throttle was to just like biker gang kitsch. But anyway, yeah, I mean, who disagrees with me?
I put it below Ikaruga, but that was my opinion. I got to hear from Bob. He's
you know what? I would also put it below Ikaruga. I would put it above Sin and Punishment.
You know what? I'll live with that.
Between Ikaruga and Sin and Punishment, then, just so we could bridge those treasure games. I do really like Full Throttle, but if not just for the whole confusing Old Mine Road bit, it does lose a few points, so I'm going to concede with your placement. However, I will say in Full Throttle's case that it is definitely worlds away better than what I'd say is Sierra's premier adventure game of 1995, which was Phantasmagoria.
I do want to say one more thing.
Yeah, what's that?
This is like the first good adventure game we've actually really covered. We're going to have to think about how many games we're going to have that go above it.
Well, there's a lot of adventure games I put above it. I mean, it's just people don't nominate them.
Yeah, I only encourage that people do nominate more adventure games.
If somebody nominated Grim Fandango, I think we'd really have to... Or even like somebody nominated, say, The Walking Dead, like one of the more recent games in this genre.
Because that's, I think, we haven't really... We don't really get to discuss that, but... Because adventure games in many ways, point and clicks, they bombed for a while, and then I think they got much better. Like, they had the potential and the ease of development.
It's the hindsight. I'd say they're kind of like fighters in that way. I mean, fighters never really went away, but they kind of went away. Like 2D fighters. 2D meaning like 2D plane,
they coasted for much of last decade before Street Fighter 4 brought them back to prominence.
And it's like anybody, let's all do it. Let's bring back Mortal Kombat.
Full Throttle's an interesting one because it has like a big... kind of like a comparatively high budget behind it, and it's definitely a must play if you're interested in adventure games.
Yes.
But once you've played it and once you finish, you'll be like, well, that was really good, but...
you'll never have to play it again because you'll remember everything about it.
Yeah, that's a catch of most of these adventure games. I mean, they look great, but, replay value, it is what it is.
I don't want to, I don't want to
adventure games until recently. Like, I think nowadays, like the adventure games that you can play, you do want to play them again because you want to try doing the completely opposite thing that you did before, see what happens.
Right, multiple pops.
I want to say the point of those games is that you should only play through them once and live with your choices forever. But, no, I see where you're coming from.
Just for fun. Like, just be like a huge douche to everybody. Like, just see what happens. Like.
That's why they make them like that. Most people, like, this is true, and this is true from, they had this from Fable 2, I think it was. There was, like, they had, analytics and stuff, and they were like, like 90% of players, they only play their good path. But we put the bad path in there as well, because for that 10%, they're like, yeah, this is great, like.
All right, so we're putting this under Ikaruga?
Yes, that is correct. I think that's where we're going with this. I think Tango has conceded it.
Okay, I'm going to agree with that. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. Next game for the show is Sewer Shark, nominated by @Griff, who I think is nominating another game, but I forget. But thank you, I guess. It was developed by Digital Pictures, who no one has ever heard from again, and published by Sony ImageSoft. It's released for the Sega CD on October 15th, 1992.
Yeah, it was pretty much a launch title, I think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it was basically a launch title for the Sega CD.
It was a packing game, wasn't it? At one point,
it was, but it was a packing game later on. It wasn't pack-in from the start, which is an important note. It is the best-selling Sega CD game because it was a packing game.
I guess I can understand that if you're trying to give like the best example of what the Sega CD was meant to do. You pick Sewer Shark, even if it's not the best game.
They really missed the chance to give us the Make My Video series. I mean, I guarantee you the Sega CD would have been better remembered if it came with Marky Mark or Crisscross or what have you.
Was there an NXS?
There was an NXS. Yes, that was the third one.
That's the one. That's the one to get.
Yeah, I have to agree.
So, I mean, it's definitely a conceptual demo of we can play video on your console.
Right. Do you think this kind of game is really what the Sega CD was meant to do?
That is the question of it. I feel
like the Sega CD was meant to do Sega Genesis games plus like anime cutscenes.
Well, that's true. Yeah, but that's what they played up. That's what was a big deal. FMV.
I think when they made the Sega CD, they kind of realized, okay, no one's going to buy it if we show them pictures of Sonic the Hedgehog because they won't understand that there's CD music. So videos, just videos, that's all it is.
Yeah, this was around the time when, in 93, lots of video games were... 92, oh shoot. Well, early 90s where disc-based media was starting to come to prominence, that's what we call multimedia, word that our best friend Snarbu threw around a lot in earlier days of GC9X to just describe anything that just excessively uses technology to its limits, whether or not it should.
More than one media. It has words and images.
Yes.
Images and words.
Video
second seminal album by Dream Theater, also.
So, there is one thing with this game I want to talk about real quick. This game was originally meant to come in like the late 80s for a system that was released called the Nemo.
What?
Which actually, that was the code name. The proper name is the Control Vision.
Control Vision sounds...
I have never heard of
this. It's a system that ran games like Sewer Shark and Night Trap on videotapes.
Was this system even released, or did you say it died It died in the water,
yeah. Who made the Nemo?
Hasbro, actually.
Well, that makes sense.
I was hoping it would be like Whammo, creator of the Slip and Slide.
And me and Cal were discussing this not long ago. There were some pitch games for the Nemo that apparently were enough to give this game such a massive budget. I believe it's like $8 million.
How could you have a video game system that ran off of VHS tapes that was not just a VCR?
That's actually a very good question. I'm not actually sure how it worked.
VHS games or game-like objects were not uncommon. Like, they existed.
We should probably talk the game, though. Sewer Shark is a game about a very angry man who goes from hating the fact that you exist to being your best friend in the space of a half hour.
So it's kind of like future Top Gun in a way?
Well, actually, he's the original Tsunandere.
I'll be honest.
I'm going to throttle you for that.
You guys can have Dog's Power. My spirit animal is Ghost. I want to know what Ghost's deal is. I want the Sewer Shark extended universe.
You do kind of feel like you can't see him from the waist down, but you feel like there's like a Zubaz pair of Zubaz involved.
The thing about the Sewer Shark game is that it's really difficult to talk about the game because the world of the universe is kind of the only thing it's got going on that's even remotely interesting.
I'm going to be honest, okay? I'm just going to be completely honest. This game is barely a game. I'd say Uncanny X-Men was more of a game than this Sewer Shark is.
I am looking at a video clip. 20 minutes in looks absolutely no different from 2 minutes in. You're just going through what appears to be the same mechanical corridors while, like, frogs and bats just float about.
They're actually supposed to be rats. I mean, they look like frogs, but they're supposed to be rats.
Whatever those yellow things are, yeah.
They're rat alligators.
What is the importance of patrolling the sewers? That's what I want to know.
Well, you see, you are a person that patrols the sewer, and it is important because the manual doesn't say. The manual negs you. There's lots of negging in the manual.
Hey, careful now.
And then it tells you how to play the game, which is important because there's a couple of pieces about the game that are a little bit more difficult. So I will explain how the game is actually played, just because, I mean, maybe for the 3 people who don't know what Sewer Shark actually is, it's a shooting gallery where occasionally you have to press a button. You have to follow a series of commands. The game will tell you, like, 363, and that means that when the game tells you that there's a sort of like an up moving direction, you press the up and B button, and then you move to the right, and then you move down. And it gives you fake directions sometimes. Don't go down them because you'll probably die. And then you shoot things, and hopefully you shoot enough. And you can't waste your ammo because you have a constantly expelling amount of energy, and shooting takes your energy. So it's a game where you shoot, and you're not encouraged to shoot. Enemies, when you shoot them, don't always die because it's an FMV. So when you shoot them, you have to shoot them, and then it has to get close enough to play their death animation. It's great. There's this whole thing going on there.
It's a timing thing, right? It's a kind of Dragon's Lair-esque.
Yeah, it tries to be seamless about it, but basically the enemies in the actual tube, you can shoot them really far away, and then it'll tag them as being hit, but they won't die until they approach the point where the game can play the "they died" animation in the frame. It's what's the name? A bit of smoke and mirrors in this game. It's actually a technical achievement. If it's not good, but it's a technical achievement because one of the reasons it's so kind of repetitious is it's actually running 4 tracks of video at the same time, and that's on CD. It's spooling all of those at the same time because if you actually play the game, which I don't think anyone would recommend, but you could watch a video of someone else playing it, it's pretty seamless. Like, it doesn't... Like, it's not like... If you've ever played Dragon's Lair, you'll know, like, every, like, half a second, the game stops while it loads the next decision point.
It switches... So, like, based on what you do, it switches to, like, the next... Like, the appropriate reel of...
It switches to the appropriate reel, but the way that they, encoded or burnt the CD... or press the CD, and the way it's programmed, they're all actually connected together kind of on the actual tracks so that it loads it really quick.
The VHS tape had 4 like concurrent reels on it, and then like the header would like switch to the appropriate reel. Wow.
And they had to replicate that on a 2-speed CD-ROM. I think it's 2-speed. You guys can check, maybe it's 1-speed, but they had to replicate that on a CD. And either way, that was an insane prospect, and they did it. And I mean, it's not a good game, but that's pretty interesting technically. And it's one of the reasons the game kind of has to be crap, because you can't run it and it also be good. That's the way it works.
Can I
kind of like a Michael Bay film?
I really want to talk about something. People need to know about this, okay? Mm-hmm. So I was recording the video for this game, for the video version of our podcast. Please watch, subscribe, and all that. The video comes out with 17 minutes. Of that, about 9 minutes and 30 seconds gameplay. But I wanted to do an experiment. I wanted to see what happens if you just did not shoot anything ever. And as long as you keep in the right directions, you don't technically have to shoot anything. I mean, you'll lose eventually because you need like a certain score to progress, but you could pretty much just eat a sandwich while you're playing this game and it wouldn't matter.
That's a plus.
Enemies won't attack you. You just keep going. Just do nothing.
It is unfortunate that the game is the pacing's not superb. Kind of actually like a very old arcade game in some ways. It starts slow, and then eventually the enemies start being able to hit you to an extent, and that just drains your energy. But the early, and this is what Bob was at, like the first 10 minutes, the enemies don't hit you.
In the interest of fairness, I tried to actually... My second time through, I actually made an attempt at playing, and it's so hard to hit anything that you'll hardly be able to make the score target anyway, and you get yelled at. There's a lot of yelling in this game.
Yeah, you get yelled at if you don't press shoot when you're told to, which is one of the most amazing parts of this game. There is a point in the game where the ghost character will... rig the weapon, rig your, it's not actually called the sewer shock, it's got a specific name, I can't remember what it is. Okay, the whole hog, thank you. I'm glad that you know the extended canon of the universe. Thank you. But he rigs it up with a gun, and then he says, yeah, let's try this baby out. And then he says, 3, 2, 1. And if you don't press shoot at that one, and you have literally like a half a second, 1 second window, you game over. The game kicks you out. He says, you're not serious about this! And then he throws you out of the game, and that's it. Like, you lose. You have to start playing again.
I couldn't really tell what the losing conditions for this game were. It just seems like it just told you to get the hell out whenever it just felt cranky.
You can hit a wall, and that'll instantly kill you.
Oh, well, that too, yeah.
Similar, either you die in this game either from taking the wrong direction, Not always. Early on in the game, if you take the wrong direction, it won't kill you. But pretty soon it'll just kill you every single time. So it's kind
of. You also have to have a certain score at the at a certain point in the game where your boss fires you.
But yes, much like Night Trap and several other games of this ilk, there are score gates where essentially if you don't have a minimum number by X time, the game will say, you fail, get out of the game.
And that's like the only reason you have to shoot anything for the most part.
Which is interesting because from a meta perspective, you're actually disobeying your boss. So
I think I should note that... Actually, Bob, do you want to talk about the boss in question?
This game has your boss. He's evil, surprising nobody.
Presented in FMV, high quality, like 180 by 7 pixel video.
Or you can play the 3DO version. That has slightly better video quality.
I think the 3DO... I don't know if the 3DO version is better in terms of gameplay. I realize that sounds stupid, but I don't know which one.
It's better in the sense that you paid like an extra $120 for it, and so it damn well better be better.
The point is, probably this game's biggest star is Robert Costanza, I believe his name is.
Costanzo, not George Costanza.
If you look at his IMDb, he's been in a lot of stuff. He's been in Total Recall. I think he was Quaid's construction worker friend from Earth.
Yeah, and he was in Die Hard 2 also, but probably the role that most geeks know him for is Detective Bullock, the shady policeman on Batman the Animated Series. And I will admit that is actually some decent star power, probably much more than this game deserves.
When we talk about the star power, I would like to say that this game cost $3 million to put together.
Yeah, for a late 80s game, it's got some pretty okay CGI.
Like, they got some actual actors, they built actual sets, the camera work is nice. I mean...
In a sort of indie house way, it is technically impressive, but I just have to ask the blunt question. Did anyone who was developing this ever... take a step back and look at their product and ask themselves if this game was really worth publishing?
By the time anybody could have done that, they'd already spent $250,000.
They were
like, nobody's going to admit it's not worth what they...
So was a sort of the only way out is through type situation.
Yeah, well, what you have to understand about this is...
kind of like getting a fish hook stuck in your hand. Like, you just have to keep pushing it through. You can't pull it back out.
Oof.
They started making this game, essentially, they started this game somewhere in about 1986. So if you think about it from that perspective, if you're looking at, the NES, and then you're showing, full motion video, I can see where, someone would think, wow, that's so much better. I'm a 60-year-old executive. I don't understand kids or video games, but wow, video. That's what we're looking at here.
Is that actually when the footage was recorded in 1986?
1986 was when the original demos for the Control Vision Nemo were created. Then they went full steam on Night Trap and Sewer Shock after that point. The Control Vision was supposed to come out in 89. They pulled the plug on it 2 months before they were going to actually kind of roll out. So...
I appreciate...
It was going to cost $300, and they realized that no one was going to pay $300 for Sewer Shock, so they...
I appreciate that they wanted to, stick with the sinking ship, but I gotta say, compared to Digital Pictures' other magnum opus, Night Trap, or even Double Switch... This game is even boringer than those. At least those had an interesting angle. This is just shooting and moving and nothing else, and it's just really sloppy.
Now, here's the thing, okay?
Not enticing.
Night Trap, you're still sitting and watching things happen, but the game is honest about it. That is the game's central concept.
That's a good point, yeah.
It does not try to make itself look more exciting than it is, and I can appreciate that.
Well, I mean, this game, it tries to be something... interesting. It is got a lot to do in similar with the Laserdisc games of earlier years, where they were like, let's overlay cool looking footage with some pictures and maybe people will like it. And this game didn't do well in terms of score. I think it kind of averaged 60-70% kind of marks. I'm going off memory here, but that's about where it would sit. For 1992, all this game had going for it was wow, FMV.
My question is, where does it sit on our list?
All right,
very low.
I'm going to put this under Caverns of Kafka. Because, like
You're
I said,
insane.
this
You're
barely
insane.
qualifies as a game, okay? Barely.
My decision that I had thought down, I put it underneath Mario Pinball Land. That's where I had placed it in my head. And and the reason why is some of those bottom games, something like those are games that I wouldn't even say look at them. Like I would say, you don't want to look at these. You don't. They're bad. Don't touch them.
Here's my reasoning, okay? The FMV is entertaining, so it gets one rank above Uncanny X-Men, which is no redeeming qualities. It gets another rank above Eat the Cat because it is an original concept, not reskinned. But that's as far as it goes for me.
Caverns of Kafka but I mean, this game is in its way as ambitious as Caverns of Kafka.
This game is really ambitious.
Ambitious, like their reach exceeded their grasp, but that's not.
It is not a complete glitchy mess, so I will allow it to go above Kafka.
Like the thing is, when you break down what the game is, it is, it's okay. The FMV is entertaining. You're not going to hate that bit. It is fun.
We're not judging this on like a movie, though.
You gotta judge it on what it has, though.
Yeah. What it has is Michael Bay-esque explosions and screaming in your face. I would not place this higher than Amagon. As much as I hate Amagon, I will admit this is even turdier than it. But Xerxes, what do you want to say?
I would say I would put it below Mario Pinball Land, above Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball.
Wow. No.
All right.
Wow.
That's what I've been saying. And really? I want to see Xerxes, yeah. What's your...
Well, I just say, like, Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball, the sole redeeming aspect of it is its name. Its license is crazy. Sewer Shark, it's like its ambitious game. If you play it it doesn't take very long to play it and feel like, well, I've gotten all there is to get out of this game. And you do kind of need to see something like this to get an idea of like, well, this is what people thought games should be like in the future.
It's really funny because people genuinely thought in 92, they were like, you know what the future is? It's this.
And people were thinking that as far back as the mid 80s, which is when this game started production. So it's like, you can get an idea of what people thought this could be what games would be in the future. And that is a useful thing to know. Like that is something, I mean, so far,
from a conceptual level for me, as I said, they spent $3 million on this game, but you won't see that you can't trump Sewer Shock with some other like game in a lot of ways. Like, it's such a stupid thing, and they spent so much money to make a game of this production value. There are like 1,000 Amagons. There are like hundreds of just trash platformers and whatever that are horrid.
There are a handful of Sewer Sharks. Right.
Yeah, okay, I can see your reasoning there. I won't agree with that.
And that's,
if you count FMV like turd boxes to be like its own genre, like Sewer Shark ranks, relatively in the middle.
Yeah, it's not the worst FMV game.
It's not as good as Night Trap.
No.
but yeah.
And if you're gonna play it, the 3DO version has slightly more footage. Actually, surprisingly, there's a little bit of footage that's only used in the 3DO version. And Sewer Shark does try and take advantage of its FMV format. There are a couple of little changes in the way the game plays. There's one point with recharge stations that it shows you a visual graphic and you have to decide which way to go. So it does try,
So are we going to put it, so as I understand it, there are 3 votes for right below Mario Pinball Land, right below or right above Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball.
It was really up to, I think, Bobbinator to shift it.
I'll work.
Well, I was going to argue to place it even lower, but I think we've talked about this game far too long, so I'm just going to say screw it and call it a day.
And we're done. Okay, so our last game for the show is Final Fight, which was nominated by Xin Kurosawa, XYN Kurosawa on Twitter. It was developed and published by Capcom, released in arcades on December 1989, according to Wikipedia. No way to corroborate that. What makes it interesting, I think, and this is kind of what I'm going to lead off with here, is that the game sort of, in my opinion, it's a beat 'em up, but it has like the kind of art direction and character design that would later be showcased in Street Fighter 2.
As a matter of fact, Xerxes, I believe an early title for this game actually was Street Fighter 89. So it was going to be directly linked, if not a full-fledged sequel to the original Street Fighter before they took it in a new direction.
I think that's fair. Like,
fun bit of
doesn't seem all that different from the original Street Fighter. It's clearly more inspired by Double Dragon and other beat 'em ups like, Renegade, etc.
Well, the genre of like fighting games and beat 'em ups early on was very kind of mixed, and no one really had a proper defined between the two. Like,
this
especially
game is,
in England,
it's basically the Wolfenstein of its genre. It was done before, but never as good or as well as it had been before Final Fight.
I mean, I would put a little caveat on that, which is that like before Wolfenstein, we had like MIDI Maze.
Like I said, it was done before.
Let
me finish that thought here, which is that like MIDI Maze, the difference between MIDI Maze and Wolfenstein is pretty huge, whereas the difference between Double Dragon 2 and Final Fight is not all that huge. Like but it's mostly like Final Fight has bigger sprites, which is a key feature of beat 'em ups, like in the genre's heyday. And it has much better art direction, much better character design. Otherwise, it's not all that different.
No, it's a little bit smoother, a little bit more punchy as such, but it's not drastically different like as a game.
The boss battles are a huge difference, I think. That's a big addition to the genre. And, every stage has its own unique boss. Where with the Double Dragon games, like I think they had, it's kind of like you had a Bobo and then you had two Obobos and then you had Purple Obobo, that kind of thing. They had bosses. There was like Machine Gun Joe and all that stuff, but it wasn't the same. They didn't have that much more care. Like the thing about the bosses in Final Fight and basically every beat 'em up afterwards is that they had to be a couple steps beyond like the regular, doofuses that you beat up throughout the levels. Like they couldn't just be like a slightly bigger guy. It had to be something unique.
Well, not only the bosses, but even the regular enemies actually do have a lot of personality and a unique distinction in their design.
Honestly,
go ahead.
One of my complaints with Final Fight, I feel like it does not have as much personality as a lot of later games.
True, but it was before those later games. Like those later games had to beat Final Fight.
At the moment you're positioning Final Fight as what games were before it. Then when Final Fight came along, what is Final Fight?
Basically, yeah.
Pretty much, Technos was pretty much the only producer of beat 'em ups, and I gotta say, like the original arcade Double Dragon doesn't hold up well today. It is really choppy by today's standards. Things just slow down whenever a third sprite gets introduced to the screen. But Final Fight has like 8 enemies all at once, and it never slows down, which was
huge. And the level art is great. It's like the backgrounds are really detailed. It's, I believe, the first beat 'em up where you can eat street turkey. I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure it is. And that is
there's one thing
aspect.
I wouldn't say there's many things at all Final Fight did better than games that came after, but if there is one thing, it is really good at having a lot of enemies on the screen at once, which I can appreciate.
I'm not sure beat 'em ups would have become a thing if it weren't for Final Fight.
I'm kind of harsh on it. I know I kind of sound like the villain here, but it's not a bad game. I don't want to sound like it. It's just, I appreciate what it did. I also appreciate what Super Mario Brothers, the original, did, but you wouldn't say it's better than, say, World.
I think I can actually draw a decent comparison. Say, take a later Capcom beat 'em up. My personal favorite, Alien vs. Predator. Alien vs. Predator is like Earthbound, while Final Fight is Earthbound Beginnings. Little callback to a previous episode.
That's a good way to look at it.
I mean, I do think you guys are getting a little bit ahead here, because I don't think we even mentioned what the hell Final Fight is as a game.
Final Fight,
What it isn't.
It's like a side-scrolling beat 'em up, very much in the vein of Double Dragon, as we've mentioned, has connections to the Street Fighter shared universe, I guess. It has 3 playable characters. You can play 2 at a time. The characters are the generic Cody, who's a guy in literally jeans and a white T-shirt. His girlfriend gets kidnapped by the Mad Gears, vaguely Warriors-esque street gang, which is ruled by Mr. X. Is he or am I thinking of Streets of Rage?
No. The big boss is known as Belger of Final Fight.
Belger, yeah.
Yep.
So,
he's the wheelchair dude. Jessica, Cody's girlfriend, gets kidnapped. Also, the daughter of the mayor of the city, Mike Hagar.
Who is,
as it turns out, an ex-pro wrestler.
Yeah, ex-pro wrestler.
Really? You would never guess he was an ex-pro wrestler.
He has like the Lil Abner, like one suspender kind of like overalls too, which is...
Yeah. That's his mayoral outfit, right? Like he's just sitting there like in his office and he's just like, my daughter's been kidnapped. Hey!
You really, really don't want to pass off Mike Hagar because he can fight Galactus and win.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure his to get elected as mayor, his campaign was just like, I will literally punch crime in the face.
He does. He does.
Many years later, I think Hagar is still the greatest politician in all of video games because his approach to solving things is just punching guys, which is
pile driving things.
Yeah, exactly. Slamming everybody, which turns out to be a lot more effective than a bunch of block bureaucracy.
Final Fight, the first beat 'em up that includes the mash all buttons to do special move that depletes your health.
I think it might have been, actually, or at least definitely the first one majorly innovated, but that could have been like a... I want to say it was the first, and I know that every one of Capcom's beat-em-ups and many others by other companies basically had that in there as a bailout if you get locked into a punch loop from other enemies. It's a bit of a penalty, but at least it's better than just taking a full string of hits.
One flaw about this game I really hate. I hate how many enemies there are where your main attack is just punching you very slowly 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I mean that's what beat 'em ups did. I mean that's definitely something that evolved and changed a little bit in successive years. But
wait, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much. We forgot to mention that everybody loves Hagar. Cody's there; he has a reason to be there. Just
you gotta talk about the other guy.
The other guy, yes, his name's Guy, and he's a ninja for some reason.
He's a ninja in Zubaz and Nike Air Force One.
Well, actually, that factor didn't come along until he became a playable character in Street Fighter Alpha. It just seemed like he had pretty standard boots in the original game here.
He's still a white guy hip hop ninja, which is...
I mean, he's so unimportant that they didn't even bother putting him on the thoughts.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing I learned though. Guy's appearance was actually modeled after one of the bandmates of the band Fugazi, Guy Picciotto, who has the sort of similar, slightly flat top black hair that Guy has in this game.
Did not know that.
And this game does have quite a few musical references to it. How there's a couple of burly guys known as Axel and Slash, and that certain character by the name of Poison, likely named after the '80s band. And
I mean that's a big part of this is the character design, which I want to say is it predates Street Fighter 2, which is a huge deal. Just to wrap up on Guy, the characters did have differences between them in a way that a lot of subsequent beat 'em ups did not bother to do. Cody, these are minor differences, but I think they're important for differentiating it. It's it is an innovator, but it's not as unsophisticated as it may seem. Cody, almost every street fighting beat 'em up has the knife weapon that you can pick up off the ground and immediately hurl at your enemies, even though that is a huge waste of knife. But Cody can just will pick it up, and if you're close enough to the enemy you're attacking, he'll just stick him like a pig right in the belly, which is great because he later goes to prison in the story, and so he just
very realistic there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really grim what they did to him. Apparently, one of the bosses is a corrupt cop named Eddie, and I think Eddie managed to bust Cody for fighting too much as a personal grudge, and then
I'm gonna point something out. Is it me or does Guy feel objectively inferior to Cody and Hagar?
Well, Guy can jump off of invisible walls. He can jump off the edges of the TV screen.
Yeah, he got sort of crap power there. I mean, Guy, he's the speedy one of the bunch, and his extra speed is useful. I'll never be able to replicate this, and the difficulty might have been toned down, but Guy's the only character I managed to get to stage 4 without continuing. That was a really good day, but
it just feels like his damage output is just so nerfed.
But it is, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
You guys talk about jumping, and it reminds me, this might be the first game that you can, in a beat-em-up, where you can jump on top of crates and stuff. You can actually do that. You don't just have to break them. You can jump on top of them. The world is there. It's present.
That's true, yeah. That is a good point. In Double Dragon, you can pick up oil drums and throw them, but...
Yeah, and this takes the next step where now you can throw them. And you can jump on top of them, and then you can jump off them and kick things. There's a nice physicality, which is so important to
you can roundhouse kick a phone booth and grab an apple.
No, you can't throw them. You can only break them, but you can use swords and pipes at least.
That's right. They switched it around.
I mean, it's got let's go over some of the other high points of its character design. One of the cool thing about, this isn't character design, but this is just more a cool detail of the game. But every enemy, as soon as you punch them, you'll see their life bar pop up, which I believe is a beat 'em up first.
Yeah, I think that was an innovation too.
It will give them a name. So even if they're just a palette swap of an earlier enemy, they'll still have a unique name, which is great.
And the absolute base tier enemy is known as Bread, B-R-E-D, which I really hope was a typo for Brad and not some sort of
I think it was.
I don't know how it could
2P, right? So
yeah, 2P, whose appearance is actually inspired by the second player, 2P, hence, of a earlier Capcom game, Forgotten Worlds, which I like quite a bit. I should also note that this game runs on Capcom's designated proprietary arcade system, the CPS-1, a special arcade board they had for developing their games around this time, and it was some pretty powerful stuff. I mean, I feel that is because of the CPS-1's technical power they had at the time that this game was able to run as butter smooth as it did while having 8 enemies on the screen at once.
Smooth as butter.
Exactly.
Indeed, it was. Andore was a unique enemy introduced.
Yes, Giant.
Andre the Giant parody.
Yeah, and...
Is he a parody, or is he just kind of more of a homage to the gentleman in question?
I don't think he wears pants, which Andre the Giant was noticeably not.
He usually had a singlet, yeah. And it should also be noted that Andore, he's always a very tough enemy. He almost feels like a mid-boss, but he is infamous enough to later become his own character in Street Fighter 3, although they changed his name to Hugo, I guess out of respect of Andre the Giant's estate. But yeah, Hugo...
but his name wasn't Andre; it was Andore.
You know what? I don't know why they changed it.
Respect. They were probably worried they were going to get sued.
No, they weren't.
I don't know.
I don't like.
Wouldn't that count as likeness? I don't know.
Yeah, but Hugo and
look that similar to Andre the Giant. He doesn't have a Frenchy fro type thing. He's got.
He does in some of his instances, not necessarily in
it's not
in Final Fight. Final Fight he doesn't, but
yeah, but
like I said, he's wearing pants. Poison is another iconic character. Is I guess kind of notable in a sort of not so in a very late 1980s, early 1990s Japan kind of way, where he's as a
everyone knows the story of Poison.
Yeah, they
I'm just going to sum it up and say this. Whatever the status of Poison is, she is not somebody you should consider a role model. Because he's like an ex-con who whips people. That's not okay, whatever your gender.
Yeah, it's not as repulsive as Eddie E, though. Like, Eddie E is like a true, like, douchebag.
I will say they flip-flopped, I think, several times on what exactly her gender status is. She looks attractive no matter what, I will say that. But I'm just really confused as to what they eventually decided.
It doesn't really matter. It's just like the Poison character is like...
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes is a transgender character, other times is not, depending on how the character is... in what territory it's portrayed. But there are different stories about how this happened. But anyway...
It is notable that she became a fully realized character many years later in Street Fighter Cross Tekken, then Ultra Street Fighter 4. But then again...
Howling around with Andore, right?
Yeah, she's his manager on the pro wrestling circuit, actually.
Right.
But I should also note that Andore and Poison and several of the other bosses and a few of the other enemies, they're all playable in a fighting game called Final Fight Revenge, which isn't great apparently. No. But yeah, only counting legitimate appearances. I know that two of the bosses, Sodom and Rolento, one's this bulky Japanese-looking guy who you fight in a wrestling ring.
Rolento a boss?
Yeah, Rolento is the...
Rolento was just like a generic enemy that you fought towards the end of the game.
No.
Boss.
I'm thinking of the other guys, like the weird, knife-throwing guy.
Hollywood and Elgato. Those are actually Rolento's subordinates, I believe. Rolento's their commander. You fight Rolento himself atop of an elevator, and he's a jerk who spams a lot of grenades at you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Guy and Cody themselves became playable in in Street Fighter Alpha. Hagar has yet to make a proper appearance, but he was in Marvel
Saturday Night Slam Masters, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, I love Slam Masters so much. Yeah, Slam Masters is canonically takes place before Final Fight. It's his wrestling days along with several other neat characters. And, of course, Hagar is playable in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and he's one of my personal favorites. Because you get to beat superheroes with a lead pipe with him, so that's great. That's all the appearances I can think of for everybody outside of Final Fight. This part's probably going to get cut in the long run, but I just thought it was interesting to note all that.
Well, it is a good point. Like, we're going to have to rank this next, but like, I do want to say, like, I don't think that Street Fighter 2 would have existed without Final Fight.
I don't think so either. Street Fighter 2 really owes a lot of its design, its visual appearance, and maybe even a little bit of its gameplay to Final Fight's own flow. I mean, compare Final Fight to the original Street Fighter, which is just clunky as hell. The move list is maybe a little simpler, but I think just like the visual appeal and a bit of the controls.
Quite simpler.
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, of course, Street Fighter 2 made a good deal more complex. I think someone got the idea of combining like Street Fighter and Final Fight like peanut butter and chocolate to give us Street Fighter 2, and that's how that came out.
There are plenty of better beat-em-ups later, but this is really, in my opinion, like, this is why there were still beat-em-ups being made in the future. Like, I don't think anybody would have bothered with it. There'd be no Ninja Turtles.
I cannot deny that. It's a very important game.
That's what we're going to have to consider along with the game when we throw it into this list that we have.
Are we ready to give rankings? I have an idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
Between Street Fighter 3 and Outrun.
Right, I think everyone's looking on the list to try and work out where the hell.
Yeah, okay, so Street Fighter 3 is currently ranked
number 28.
And Outrun is currently ranked number 29.
I mean, let's not get hung up on it.
I would put it above Street Fighter 3. I would put it above just because, like, Street Fighter, first of all, everybody knows my opinion about Street Fighter 3, which is it's a good game mechanically, but the character design is garbage.
I still highly disagree with
Final Fight, to be honest.
Oh, we can't make this into Street Fighter 3 again.
Oh boy,
Final Fight is character design the game.
Here it comes.
That's what it is.
I mean, aside from milquetoast, two protagonists who are just kind of like, oh, those guys.
Hang on. Let me say this. I really do like Guy and Cody a lot. It's just their problem is they're not Hagar. That's why everyone hates them.
You like Guy and Cody? This is why you like Street Fighter 3 characters. Because you like Guy and Cody.
Andore made it into Street Fighter 3, so they have some
damned
synchronicity.
Sodom Eddie E. I mean, the Rolento. I mean, the
Abigail,
bosses are memorable. You've got the bad guy at the end who's in a wheelchair, and then he jumps out of it and like pulls out a machine gun.
It's an automatic crossbow that has an improbably infinite
awesome.
number of
I feel like
bolts. Yeah,
I gotta bring up like the elephant in the room. I don't think there's very much at all that Final Fight does that Streets of Rage 2 did not do better.
Well, Streets of Rage 2 isn't in the list, man.
Right, but we gotta keep in mind.
And also, Streets of Rage 2 would not exist if it were not.
There's no doubt that definitely
Fight.
Streets of Rage as a genre was like, let's take Final Fight and kind of neonify it. Let's put it in that sort of seedier
Super
neon.
Nintendo exclusive, the port, and they're like, well, we can do that. And so they make the sprites a little bit smaller. They decrease the colors. They have like a future element to it. It's a great game. Like I'd rather play Streets of Rage or Streets of Rage 2 than I would play the Super Nintendo Final Fight in its sequel.
Oh yeah, we didn't touch upon the infamous port of this game, which took out Guy and the entire industrial area, and also did not have 2-player co-op on it.
But they added, 2 sequels.
We're not going to rank the conversion because that's not super.
Yeah,
bad.
I do think that the first Rushing Beat is better than the SNES port of Final Fight, which I got a lot of flack for when I wrote the Rushing Beat article for Hardcore Gaming 101. But I still stand by my ground because, Rushing Beat's a little janky, but it at least had co-op while the port didn't. I'm sorry, I just wanted to vent
But the Sega CD version of Final Fight is actually pretty great.
Oh yeah, no, that's
I want to actually play for the video, and I actually like that soundtrack a lot better.
Oh, the soundtrack's excellent.
I don't think that Final Fight has a very good soundtrack, and that's big flaw for me.
It's true. It's not. It's a
yeah, the CPS1 sound design was what it was. It was old, but
there's only like one song that's really that good, and that's only because of an Alpha 2.
The first Bay Area track is really good though.
But transport yourself back to 1989. Okay, so you're looking at Final Fight.
I was born then, jerk.
You're looking at Final Fight next to all the other stuff that's out, and it's like Final Fight looks like a emissary from the future of video games. It does not look like the other games.
It did, like, in a lot of ways. Like, we know that in terms of influence, there's no doubt that from, like, people were just like, whoa, that's what a game should look like. Because there are so many games that are just like Final Fight tweaked a bit in terms of, like, visual appearance. And, I mean, Capcom themselves helped because pretty much every game that they did for years after had, like, definitely had elements of the Final Fight style. Like, they latched onto this and went, this is the design style we want. We just keep pushing this.
We're happy with number 30 on this list. I'd be okay with that. Between Street Fighter 3 and Outrun.
I'm not okay with that. I feel like this is a bigger game. Like, I would put it below... I would put it exactly below Blue Stinger, because no, I mean Mike Hagar is the closest you're going to get to a Dogsbauer-esque character without actually having voice acting.
No, that's a fair point. Now, here's a question. Would there be a Dogsbauer without Mike Hagar?
Definitely. Dogsbauer is like a platonic ideal of...
Dogsbauer is a fixed point in the universe, a fixed point in time.
You're right about that.
Dogsbauer exists.
I'm not going to contest this.
The universe revolves around Dogsbauer's existence. There is before and after Dogs. I mean, I would put it even above Blue Stinger. Like, I'm just saying, like, there's an entire genre that would have died.
This really is
not
a game that we have to look at as, like, are we looking at the game or are we looking at the game?
You're looking at the game in 1989, 1990. That's when you're looking at the game. There is no Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's no X-Men. There's no Alien versus Predator. There's no Streets of Rage. There's just so many games that don't happen if Final Fight doesn't happen.
I got a question to pitch. I really do love Final Fight a lot. Still one of my favorite games to this day. But I think that at least 7 of the other beat 'em ups that Capcom has worked on later are technically better than it. Question is, would you place those higher?
Those games don't happen if it were not for Final Fight.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, would you place those higher on the list than Final
Certain
Fight?
games, yes, I would.
Okay,
but
that's why I
really like this genre. But I'm just saying, like, Final Fight, like, here's the other thing. You got it. Street Fighter 2 doesn't happen if not for Final Fight.
Exactly. And I would place
a huge deal.
I would place Street Fighter 2 higher than Final Fight if we get to that.
I would too, but you gotta factor that in. There is no Street Fighter 2 without Final Fight. Final Fight proves that Street Fighter 2 is a viable concept.
Exactly.
Like, it proves that people will follow this, like, oh, this game looks amazing. I want to play this game. I want to see what happens next. It's a testament to the strength of really great art design and character design.
I mean, it is an extremely memorable title for those who played it at approximately when it was. But
even if you play
fresh.
It now, you've got to admire what it did. Like, it is different. Like, you can look at, like, say, Combat Tribes or something like that came later, much later, or even Streets of Rage. Like, Streets of Rage is maybe a superior game technically, but the character design is no better. It's probably worse.
I don't know. Streets of Rage has like
Streets
a guy
of Rage
in a jetpack.
character design is like.
I mean, Streets of Rage 2 and Final Fight have, there's a lot more similar in levels. Streets of Rage 1, definitely, they're pretty forgettable for the most part. But again, yeah, like, you can definitely see the Final Fight cast in Streets of Rage 1, and to an extent 2. It is a question of how much do we put on Final Fight? How much do we say, well, it's still...
Look, I mean, I would rank Double Dragon 2 if it were on the list above Final Fight, just because I feel like Double Dragon 2 is what made beat 'em ups a genre that somebody would want to explore. Like, there would be no Final Fight if not for Double Dragon 2. I mean,
I do, like, my opinion is obviously it's a risky road to go on, is like, well, since this game is earlier, it is more influential. But it's not just earlier, it is more influential.
Would you rank Renegade higher than Double Dragon 2 because it came earlier? That's where you have to draw the line.
Rank Double Dragon 1 higher than Double Dragon 2.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I mean, okay, so we're sitting around Blue Stinger. That's where we're sitting with Final Fight. We're sitting in that general area, which I don't think is wrong. I think, Final Fight is a game that you could definitely play, and it's really good. It's a question of whether it's earned its place high in the list. It has done that.
You have to play. Final Fight is a game you have to play. Like, I feel like you don't understand. I do too. Like, I feel like you don't understand retro games if you don't play Final Fight.
Here, let me throw out a hot pitch. I do not know why I'm thinking this, but I'm going to say between Crash Bandicoot 2 and Super Mario Land. How's about that?
See, I mean,
what I'm thinking,
I'm okay with that. Actually, like, I feel like it's in the Space Harrier range. Yeah, like,
okay. I am careful here because there are lots of these titles. There are definitely beat 'em ups that are better. I know they're not on the list. I know that.
Right.
But it's a question of, like,
I guess,
Space Harrier is a game that's hard to beat when you line it up against its contemporaries and its successors, because it's such a thing.
I guess I'm thinking about the future here. I'm thinking of if we're gonna have so many beat 'em ups, and if we'll place above.
There are beat 'em ups that are better than Final Fight, but I wouldn't say, like, you don't understand games unless you've played Alien versus Predator. You know what I mean? I'm saying, like, you don't understand the history of video games if you haven't played Final Fight. You don't have a right to an opinion.
I mean, that is the question is, like, Final Fight is directly responsible. They're all reactions to Final Fight.
I'm just saying, like, are the subsequent beat 'em ups are they that much better than Final Fight? They're really not.
I mean, like, something like Streets of Rage 2 adds just enough tweaks to really set it apart.
Streets of Rage 2, I mean, also understanding beat 'em ups as a genre, any beat 'em up that wasn't designed for the arcades is not the same thing, because it's got to be a different level of difficulty. It's got to Streets of Rage games are better than any Final Fight game just because they're made to be beaten.
Yeah, that is one point we didn't touch upon, how unfair and quarter munchy that Final Fight can
all arcade games.
Exactly.
Quarter munchy.
That's exactly another point.
I'm saying, like, Final Fight is a quantum leap, in my opinion, in terms of not game design. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying everything else that video games can be, it counts. In terms of game design, yeah, not so great, but everything else video games can do, like just the idea of world building, this game does that. It's like it's a direct predecessor of Grand Theft Auto in a sense, because every person you hit in the face has a name. They're individualized. It's something.
Though, unlike Grand Theft Auto, the police aren't on your ass. Well, unless you count Eddie, but
I know.
I know what you're saying.
World.
I did think here that the above Blue Stinger placement was a more reasonable position to me.
You mean just above Blue Stinger, not below Crash?
Just above Blue Stinger was. I mean, because it comes with a balance of influence and quality.
I can work
it's hugely influential, but I do think that there are clearly.
So you're looking at Wonder Boy and Monsterland. Is Wonder Boy and Monsterland that much better of a game? Like, is the game?
I would rather play Final Fight than Wonder Boy.
Okay, so then how about
you guys?
Okay, I actually like that. How about Between Descent and Wonder Boy then?
Okay, I'll work with that.
I'm okay with that.
Excellent, perfect. We got right to the heart.
Let's go then.
Wow!
Congratulations, Final Fight.
That's all for this episode of HardcoreGaming101.net's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to at Solusrius, at Scott HDC, at Griff, at Zen Kurosawa, for nominating those great games. And thank you to those of you who we haven't gotten to yet. We will be getting to you soon, I promise. Thanks as well to my lovely co-hosts and compatriots, Cal, Satenga, and Bobinator.
You're welcome.
It wouldn't be the same without you.
It'd just be you. You'd be like, okay, well, today I think it goes here. All right, good job.
It'd be called the top Blue Stinger of all time. And thanks as well to our editor, Jeff Rudd, and our theme song composer, Muteki, and of course, the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation to patreon.com/HG101. And you can support us by following at HG_101 and at GC9X on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the zeitgeist by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, the podcast, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or I'll shrink our YouTube videos down to the size of a postage stamp. Until next time, keeping it real. Is the faster than light part of the title?
I thought they were just
FTL?
telling you what FTL meant, just because people would short it to FTL, and they were like, what's FTL? What's faster than light? So it's not, I don't think it's ATM machine. I think it's I think it's just to make sense of the name.
But every time you see the name, it always says that underneath.
Well, it's like...
Look, the armored scrum object doesn't tell you what scrum means. It just tells you it's an armored scrum object.
Well, it's like those Private Snafu shorts where the guy says, situation normal, all fouled up. If anyone remembers those back from the golden days of WB.
I do, because I did fight in World War II, and I saw all those videos. All those film reels. The Private Snafu.
You must have lied about your age. You were
warning me about venereal disease and such.
But sorry, that's irrelevant to this game, which takes place in the future, if I'm not mistaken.
That's back when they were all like reusable condoms and stuff. It was a different time.